Good evening. My name is Arushi Malhotra.
And I'm Crean Malhotra, and we will be your MCs for this evening.
We begin today's webinar by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands on which we meet today. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and I extend this respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people tuning in today.
On behalf of the Mental Health Foundation Australia and our chairperson, Vasan, Srinivasan, I would like to welcome and thank each and every one of you for attending today's Future Leaders Forum on the 29th of October, the National Mental Health Month 2021, and joining us to have such important discussions.
National Mental Health Month is an initiative of the Mental Health Foundation Australia, the MHFA, to advocate for and raise awareness of Australian mental health as a community. The MHFA's National Mental Health Month is unlike many other mental health awareness campaigns. It aims to bring all Australians together in a nationwide conversation about the mental health, and we aim to maintain this conversation for an entire month and beyond through a series of various mental health related events. National Mental Health Month is a program that the MHFA is extremely proud of, and we intend to reach out to and educate as many Australians as possible to help reduce stigma and facilitate positive and non-judgmental discussions surrounding the important topic of mental health in Australia.
With 1 in 5 Australians experiencing a mental health illness, it is about time that we give mental health the due attention, and that is exactly what MHFA wants to achieve. Throughout this month, many events have been organised in each state and territory of Australia, aiming to attract and unite Australians of all ages and backgrounds to raise awareness of the need for better mental health for all. This year, the theme of the National Mental Health Month is Post-Pandemic Recovery Challenges and Resilience. This year's theme will focus on raising awareness about mental health in various industries and communities. Every individual has faced, and many are still facing, unprecedented challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
With this theme in mind, we aim to extend our campaign even wider than previous years, with events planned to embrace many different community groups and people of all ages, walking on the road to recovery and fostering resilience. Please join us in celebrating the Mental Health Foundation Australia by viewing a short video.
Hi everyone, I'm Vasan Srinivasan, Chairperson of the Mental Health Foundation Australia. It's a privilege to lead this wonderful community-based mental health organisation in its 91st year of establishment. The MHFA has grown strength to strength over the past few years, with Victorian Mental Health Month in 2018, the National Mental Health Month occurring in 2019, 2020 and this year in 2021. Last year, COVID-19 did not stop us from achieving our National Mental Health Month campaign. I'm proud to say we successfully shifted many events to a virtual platform, very much being able to pursue our objectives of raising awareness and advocating for better Australian mental health. Our primary aim is to reach out to and educate as many Australians as possible, to help reduce stigma and to encourage constructive and non-judgmental dialogue on Australia's critical mental health issue. A highlight of last year's campaign was reaching out to 100,000 Australians all across the country for our National Walks for Mental Health, both virtually through our MHFA app and physically in some states. What a grand success that was. In 2021, with pandemic still affecting many of us, we decided not to give up once again, curating a carefully chosen blend of virtual and physical events for Australians to participate in. This year, we have a new and improved MHFA app, giving people the opportunity to participate in National Mental Health Month from the palms of their hands. This year, theme is Mental Health and Post-Pandemic Recovery Challenges and Resilience. Mental Health Foundation Australia is proud to partner with Australian technology business DB Results and take up the well-being app Am I OK? to support our members, enabling individuals to regularly check in on a private and secure platform and ask the question, Am I OK? Am I OK also alerts the user when it's time to seek outside help. We thank DB Results for this opportunity to promote well-being and early intervention. This year, we have launched a special initiative, the Mental Health Appeal on the 10th of October, our World Mental Health Day. Through this, we aim to raise funds for the development of a course promoting life and safety in young people. At the MHFA, we pride ourselves in making sure all our programs are for the community and powered by the community. We have a vast growing network of multicultural ambassadors, youth ambassadors, and future leaders who further the community voice in promoting mental health and well-being. Our multicultural network has inspired our educational and multicultural webinars as an initiative to assist individuals cope with success during the pandemic. I would like to take this moment to thank our board directors and patrons, scientific advisory committee members, our wonderful staff, multicultural and youth ambassadors, future leaders, MHFA members and major sponsors for their continued support to our organization as we continue to work to deepen understanding of the importance of mental well-being and educating the community. Let's work in solidarity for the benefit of our mental health. Thank you, Australia.
What a heartwarming video. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Carol Crean, patron of the Mental Health Foundation Australia, to officially welcome you all this evening. A former secondary school teacher in 2003, Carol participated with the MHFA in establishing the initiative Embrace the Future, Young Australians' Mental Health and Wellbeing, a mental wellness awareness and education project for Australian youth. This initiative has developed into Resilience Australia, promoting awareness and development of resilience for Australians from conception for the prevention of mental illness issues. Please join me in welcoming Carol. Carol, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I also extend this respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples here with us. I thank the Honourable Matthew Guy, Leader of the Opposition, and Georgia Mailing from Australian Unity, who have taken the time tonight to join us. The future is shaped by the experiences of the past and the challenges and issues of the present. Our young leaders are important participants in what the future will look like. Probably the most important participants, and I wholeheartedly encourage them to participate. Today is a very special event where our wonderful Mental Health Foundation Australia future leaders have come together to share their perspectives on especially chosen mental health topics. We are proud of these leaders, this leadership team who have developed and will deliver this program for you this evening, Day 29 of National Mental Health Month 2021. Talking about the mental health of our young people is vitally important. At the Foundation, we are interested in helping young people navigate successfully through the complexities of life, develop fulfilling relationships, adapt to change, utilise appropriate coping mechanisms to achieve well-being, realise their potential, have their needs met, and develop skills that help them navigate the different environments, physical and emotional, that they inhabit. And I personally don't think that's too much to ask. I would like to mention that this year, the Mental Health Foundation Australia ran a mental health appeal on the 10th of October. We raised funds to develop an evidence-based training program specific to positive and strength-based youth mental health and wellbeing promotion and suicide prevention, primarily aimed at promoting life and safety in young people. I congratulate the Mental Health Foundation Australia's future leaders once again for helping to spearhead dialogue about the youth mental health and for demonstrating leadership, passion and conscientiousness throughout their involvement with this program. I look forward to hearing what each group presenting has in store for us this evening. Thank you all.
Thank you for your support, Carol. I would now like to invite Honourable Matthew Guy, Leader for the Opposition and Member for Bulleen, to provide today's opening remarks. We have vivid memories of him attending our walk for mental health at Albert Park Lake in 2018 and 2019, and finishing before everyone else. Please join me in welcoming the Honourable Matthew Guy.
Thank you, Arushi. And yes, I think I took the challenge up to actually run the walk, which was unique, but I tried. Not sure nowadays after COVID and the COVID kilos I could run it like I did back then, but we all have weaknesses. Thank you very much for the invitation tonight. And I too acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on all of us, on where we meet and where we discuss our topics like we do tonight. And acknowledge Carol Crean in her wonderful opening remarks with such experience and knowledge in this issue. So thank you very much, Carol, and Georgia Mailing from AusUnity, and everyone on the Mental Health Foundation board and everyone involved tonight. It's a real privilege to be here to talk to all of you guys about what is really, I suspect, one of the topics of our time, the issues of our time, and that is mental health. I suspect when a few of us online were your age, mental health was not a topic that people talked about. It was not something that people were not just aware of, but wanted to discuss. Nowadays, we know it to be as important as physical health, which it should be. And it is a topic that all of us, I suspect, will be talking about a lot more, you know, for better or for worse, what's come through the last year and a half and that through COVID. Through different generations, all of us are going to have different challenges, particularly school kids. And I've got 3 boys who I have to go and mind tonight because their mother's out. They've got their own challenges as well, through primary school into secondary school, who haven't seen each other for a while. You notice after a while their behaviour changes, and it's not a weakness, it's just a fact that they have challenges of that of their own. Their parents and adults and neighbours I see who are obviously through, whether it's business or other means, they're just contained in their homes, and they have genuine challenges which we all notice, and I notice too, and they are issues that will arise into the future. But most importantly for all of you tonight, around our youth. And I do feel very much for kids who are obviously going through year 12 or university or that age group where that is the prime of your life. And, you know, Carol and I, for our generations, will tell you that is some of the best years of your life, and who have done it very difficult, very hard over the last 18 months. And while it's been for an important reason to combat a pandemic, we understand that will affect a lot of people of those ages. So issues like discussions tonight, the Mental Health Foundation, have never been more important. And in a city like Melbourne, which really is one of the world's most diverse and multicultural cities, we have different challenges at engaging youth in backgrounds that may not be akin to discussing these type of topics. My mum's family came from Eastern Europe. It's not a discussion that they would have with each other in the far east of Eastern Europe, where they're from. But it is an important topic because it affects all of us. And culturally, we have to break down a lot of barriers. It's not just a cliche, it's true. To encounter a number of generations who would never discuss this as an issue, would never view this as a genuine health problem. It would be seen as something that wouldn't be there to be discussed. So the leadership of the Mental Health Foundation, through my friend Vasan, Srinivasan, and through the foundation and the Youth Foundation there tonight, I think it is very important for us to target a number of communities in a number of areas across a place like Melbourne, but also Australia, which is so diverse nowadays, of so many different communities where we need to get that message out. And whether it's community events like the walk, which was the other day and last year as well in a different form, or a whole different mechanisms, that has never been so important. So I think all of us will say that the work that is being done tonight, the leadership that is being done tonight, you might say some of these are small steps, but you know, from small steps, big things come. And I'd say the Mental Health Foundation is certainly getting bigger and bigger, but the bigger you get, it gets even bigger from there on. But this topic isn't one that's going to go away in our community, and you're leading it. And it's so important, not just for those in the political side, forget the politics, but those in a, I guess, parliamentary side, like myself, federal or state. We need to keep hearing about this, because whatever government is in power, federal or state, will need to keep focusing on this matter, because it is going to be, as I said at the start of these remarks, the issue of our time, certainly one of. And all of us are going to need to confront it and deal with it and manage it through our own friendship circles, but also through our own communities. That's a good thing, because 20 years ago, as I said, this wasn't a topic of discussion. Today it now is. That's a really good thing, that we actually can confront mental health issues and actually can confront these issues head on to manage it, to deal with it, which prevents so many secondary issues in many ways. Family violence, suicide, as has been mentioned, a lot of other issues that can flow from mental health issues in itself. Preventing it at the start can prevent many other issues as we go on, or as those issues progress. So well done to everyone on this Zoom tonight. Well done for the work the Mental Health Foundation does. Thank you for Carol and her opening remarks, which are very profound and very important, and to everyone that will participate tonight. I think it's exceptionally important, and it's really quite a pleasure and quite an honour to be asked to make some comments tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Guy, for your ongoing support and for joining us today despite your very busy schedule. We really appreciate it. I would now like to welcome Georgia Malling, mental health coach with Remedy Healthcare in the Mindstep team. Georgia works with clients on a daily basis and takes pride in helping her clients with their everyday emotional needs, from helping them to achieve their goals and improving their symptoms to recovering from anxiety and depression utilizing low-intensity cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Sounds very interesting. Georgia is passionate about advocating for better access to mental health and creating a future where people can freely discuss their emotional health needs in the workplace, at home, and in everyday life. No stigma and no other social barriers. She is proud to present and speak in the broader mental health community about the invaluable work we do in the mental health space to support people during this difficult time. Please join me in welcoming Georgia.
Thank you so much, Akriti. Yes, my name is Georgia Malling, and I'm here today to represent Remedy Healthcare, a subsidy of Australian Unity, as a Mindstep mental health coach. Thank you to those who have spoken before me, Carol Crean and the Honourable Matthew Guy, certainly seconding your remarks about the importance of this evening's event and looking forward to the speakers who will follow me tonight and the presentations there as well. I'd also like to begin with a welcome to country and start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the custodians of the land I work and live on as the First Nations people of this country, which for me is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I extend that respect to the many different Aboriginal lands and countries on which all of us meet today, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining in today. I also acknowledge the preservation of land, culture and language and strive to contribute towards this. I would like to firstly recognise the work the Mental Health Foundation and their great work in the mental health space. Mental Health Month gives us a fantastic opportunity to raise awareness about mental health and wellbeing and the number of different supports available, and acknowledge the amazing work being done in this space by so many people and by our wonderful future leaders here tonight as well. I've been asked to speak to you about the future of mental health and those topics that as young people we really want to talk about and see progress and innovation on. And being only 27 myself and having always been passionate about mental health advocacy, I'm very honoured to speak with you today and be part of the conversation. And it's certainly a group that I would have been pleased to be a part of could I wind back the years by a few. Remedy provides healthcare services Australia-wide, and we aim to improve the health, well-being and quality of life of every person that we care for. And I'm fortunate enough to work as one of the mental health coaches in the Mindstep program, delivering low-intensity cognitive behavioural therapy to clients daily and helping them achieve their goals and implement some practical strategies to improve their everyday mental health. In 2016, Remedy launched the Mindstep program, a telephone-based cognitive behavioural therapy coaching program, which I work for. And it was a result of global search for the best practice interventions for anxiety and depression. Over the past 6 years, we've helped thousands of people improve their mental health, and we work with people to articulate their concerns and learn strategies to work through them. The tools learned can help with low mood, high stress in future situations too, as well as at the present. And Mindstep has had academically published results showing very pleasing outcomes. In 2020, we also launched Healing Minds, which is a social and emotional wellbeing coaching program specifically for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. While still in its early days, the results to date are very promising. This year, Remedy Healthcare also announced new mental health partnerships with Tasmania and the North Coast of New South Wales primary health networks to deliver Mindstep and Healing Minds for people with anxiety and depression. And these programs are being provided at no cost to people living in those areas to help prevent more serious mental health concerns and provide better access to people in those areas. In terms of the topic tonight, it's apparent to me that innovations, outreach, destigmatization, and greater access to support is needed to address the mental health problems in our communities. I'm sure we're all familiar with some of the statistics, but as was said earlier, 1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 85 experience a mental illness in any year. And every day, at least 6 Australians die from suicide, and a further 30 people attempt to take their own life. Suicide is also the leading cause of death for young Australians aged 25 to 44, and the second leading cause of death for young people aged 15 to 24. So certainly a prevalent issue in the youth community. And what we also know is that the onset of mental illness is typically around mid to late adolescence, between 18 to 24 years old. So, as Matthew had said and mentioned earlier, we want to be able to prevent this at the start, to prevent that relapse later into life and into their future. So what can we do? And that's really why discussions like today and the leaders that are emerging from amongst the youth age group are so important to address our future and also what their future will look like. In the past few years, we've all seen the rise in wellbeing apps. Apps that focus just on exercise previously have moved to a holistic approach to address the physical and mental health connection and the whole person experience of wellness. There's also been a huge demand on mental health supports throughout the last nearly 2 years of the COVID pandemic. So self-help, online programs, telehealth, and other low-intensity services have seen an increase in demand to meet the needs of more people reaching out for support during this difficult time. And it's anticipated that the more non-traditional alternative providers of mental health services will be needed to scale up and respond to this increasing demand. This is the foundation of what Mindstep was based on, with our partner Flinders University and the UK IAPT model, to provide better access to mental health and address the access gap to treatments. I've also seen through my work that telehealth provides opportunities for people to reach out for support who may not have before because of distance, access, age, connection, confidentiality, or ease of use. It's also quite apparent that despite lockdowns lifting across the country, the impacts of COVID on people's mental health can be seen quite obviously despite the current lack of empirical evidence. What we do know is that human beings, we're social people. So restrictions such as social distancing, isolation and lockdown, remote working or schooling, loss of employment or uncertainty for the future, especially for young people, can have a lasting impact or exacerbate existing mental health problems. And it may be that we experience the consequences of COVID on people's mental health for many years to come, despite the restrictions easing. So I'm eager to hear how the youth of today want to tackle issues such as these and others that present themselves, which can impact the future of mental health, and how they feel it's best to go about it as future leaders. In closing, Mental Health Month is an important opportunity to raise awareness about mental health and the range of supports available that can improve wellbeing. Australian Unity is a company founded on social values and community contribution, and we're committed to building and promoting positive mental health strategies. We recognise and commend the fantastic work the Mental Health Foundation has achieved in this regard, and we're proud to be associated with the foundation. I'd also just like to mention that I'm available today if anyone has any questions about Remedy Healthcare or Mindstep and Healing Minds. I'd certainly be happy to answer those. But I'll hand back over to you at this stage, Arushi and Akriti. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us this evening, Georgia, and for Australia Unity's continued support. Today's event has been put together and will be presented by Mental Health Foundation Australia's Future Leaders. Our Future Leaders are a passionate group of individuals who have been working together this year to discuss the future of youth mental health scene in Australia. Today, we will hear from our future leaders speaking to different topics surrounding mental health in young people. I would just like to flag that some of the topics discussed today may be confronting. If at any stage you need to, please feel free to step away or leave the event and call support such as Lifeline on 131 114. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Ali and Georgina to kick us off by talking about mental health and mental illness.
Hi everyone. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge that I am gathered tonight on the traditional land of the Wadawurrung people, and I honour and pay my respects. Next slide. So we've heard a lot about mental health and mental well-being, but what actually is mental health? So our mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is being resilient and coping with normal stresses of life. Mental illnesses and mental health conditions are all part of your mental health. This can be described as a spectrum where good mental health is at one end and poor mental health is at the other. This can be represented by symptoms that affect people's thoughts, feelings, and/or behaviours. It's important to note that mental health can mean different things to different people. It can include finding enjoyment in life, coping with everyday stress, creating and maintaining relationships, setting and fulfilling goals. No matter who you are, you can be mentally healthy and still find yourself struggling some days, and that is completely normal. Your mental health fluctuates with your life experiences. You may develop mental illnesses any part of your life, and it's important to know how to manage this and that you're never alone. Everyone's mental health and/or illnesses looks different. There is no one-size-fits-all, nor is there no one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with your health. That is why it is so important to understand your own mental health and to identify and discover your own coping mechanisms. During this webinar, you can find support services that will best suit you and your situation, and find out how to identify your triggers and look after yourself after a tough day. Next slide.
Take a moment to reflect on the judgments, stereotypes, and misconceptions you may have about mental health. Many of these perceptions have been formed from a lack of knowledge and understanding about what mental health really is. These misconceptions can lead to individuals experiencing labeling, shame, and isolation. This is why it is important for the conversation about mental health to be normalized in order to end the stigma surrounding mental health and illness. We want to acknowledge your contribution to participating in this conversation and attending this webinar to develop your knowledge and understanding about mental health. Every person has their own mental health with unique needs and challenges. We all have a brain that needs to be cared for. Mental illness affects each individual differently, and the ways in which a person manages their mental health is unique. No matter who you are or what you're experiencing, your mental health is important. Everyone has the right to reach out for support and have access to the many resources available, which, like Ali mentioned, will be talked about later in the webinar. Next slide.
Mental health and illness awareness. Mental health can be categorized into 4 different categories, but these are the primary ones. Mentally healthy means you have a positive state of mental well-being, where you can cope and manage challenges while maintaining positive bonds with the environment. And mental health problems state where functioning isn't optimal, but it's less severe and for a shorter duration than a mental disorder. Example of this is loss of appetite and sleep for weeks leading up to an exam. Mental disorder or mental illnesses are having a combination of thoughts and feelings and behaviours which generally interfere with everyday life and functioning over an extended period of time. Next slide. Now, mental illnesses, and it is important to note that we all have mental health and wellbeing concerns at any given time, and that it is natural. It is important that we observe and are alert to our inner thoughts and feelings, particularly when we notice that we are not feeling well. Many of us work on our physical health, however, our mental health and well-being are just as important. The more we practice, the more our mental health and well-being will strengthen. Mental illnesses are very common. 1 in 5, which is about 20% of all Australians aged 16 to 85, experience a mental illness in any year. The most common mental illnesses are depression, anxiety, and substance use disorder. And anxiety is the most common mental health condition in Australia, and there are many types of anxiety. With anxiety disorders being treatable, only 37% seek treatment, which is why it's so important to reach out and seek help to reduce poor effects of poor mental health and conditions. If you'd like to know more details surrounding mental health prevalence in Australia, I recommend Beyond Blue and Better Health Victoria websites offer lots of details. And next slide.
Well done, team. And what a great start to the evening, right? There were such interesting figures and stats. And I also really resonated with the point that there really is no one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with our mental health. And we all have such unique and different ways of coping, and that's totally okay. I'll now invite the next group, Claire, Alana, and Brinta, who will be talking about early intervention, self-care, and preventative measures.
Hi, so today we'll be talking about early intervention, preventative measures and self-care. Next slide, please. Understanding yourself plays a huge part in self-care. Next slide. It is vital that we understand ourselves because this is what will help us grow and reach out for support. A part of understanding feelings is identifying stresses, which is what challenges and threatens you. This will help you become aware of what you need, whether it's reaching out for support or extra self-care measures. Emotional awareness is a skill. Nobody is a master at it, but there are many ways to guide you with it. Next slide, please. Some tools that could help are emotional awareness apps such as, next slide, Mood Meter, Mitra, and Emotional Intelligence. There are also heaps of apps that help children learn about emotions using cartoons and games.
So a common technique to engage with self-care is journaling. Next slide, please. Journaling consists of writing down your thoughts and feelings, which help you track your habits, patterns in your thinking, as well as making you reflect on them, helping you learn more about yourself in the process. It can help you clear your head, make important connections between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and even buffer or reduce the effects of mental illness as a result. Journaling requires the application of the analytical, rational left side of the brain, as well as the right hemisphere that is more creative. Overall, journaling has been found to not only boost your mood and enhance your sense of well-being, but also reduce symptoms of depression before an important or large event, reduce intrusion and avoidance symptoms post-trauma, improve your working memory, as well as helping us become more aware and self-aware in terms of helping us detect sneaky, unhealthy patterns in our thoughts and behaviors. It allows us to take more control over our lives and puts things in perspective. It can also help us shift from a negative mindset to a more positive one, especially towards ourselves. Next slide, please. So the 5 things you need to remember when journaling effectively are that journals can be any medium, any length, to set a reminder, to keep it accessible, as well as recording only your thoughts. So journals don't actually have to be in books per se. They can be recorded on any medium, a document, notes on your phone, or even a voice memo, whatever is easiest for you. You could even start it as a blog to keep yourself in check, which is also a pretty common method. As well as this, you don't have to necessarily write an essay-long entry. Journals can be any length, and you can write a paragraph, a sentence, or even a word. What really matters is that you can look back and reflect on it afterwards. Something else that's important is to set a reminder to use your journal, as having more material that accumulates in the long run makes it much easier to reflect and determine any patterns in your behavior or thoughts. Another thing to keep in mind is to keep it accessible and have it on you most of the time or all of the time if you can. Since life can be unpredictable and it's possible to forget to journal if you are overwhelmed. Also, it helps to write out your thoughts when you have them or a little after, so you don't run the risk of forgetting what you would like to write down. And the last thing to remember is to only record your thoughts. Keep your journal separate from your planner, to-do list, or calendar. Since a journal is for thoughts only, it keeps your journal much neater and less overwhelming, especially when you look back on it. And another thing to remember is that a journal is good for relaxing, so you don't necessarily even need to write on it. You can draw, brainstorm about anything, rant. It's really up to you, because at the end of the day, it's for you to both relax, rewind on, as well as reflect on as you read it later on. Next slide, please.
Currently across Australia, psychology is offered as an elective starting in years 9 or 10. Next slide, please. Although we believe the need for students to learn psychology is so important that it should become part of the Australian curriculum. Adding psychology into the basic sciences teaches us so many different academic skills, such as communication, numeracy, literacy, and research methods. These skills are crucial in most careers, and building them up in high school would give us a huge advantage later on in life. Since studies show that in the near future, we need a much higher set of skills involving problem solving and creative thinking. This is because of the amount of technological advancements being made. Psychology would encourage creative, critical, and in-depth thinking skills, which technology can't do. Psychology is considered a hub science. This means that the skills you learn in the subject links with many other skills from different fields. So even if people aren't interested in this particular science, then they'll all still gain a lot of useful knowledge for almost any job they'll get in the future. Because psychology allows you to take your understanding and use it to guide yourself and others. The study of psychology will help students become aware of what actually happens in their bodies, with connections to feelings and emotions. This could actually play a huge part in helping youth understand their own emotions. It gives you the ability to think cognitively and will give them a different perception of life in general. This lack of knowledge leads to joke about mental illnesses. For example, the phrase "I'm depressed" has been used so much that it's been turned into a general phrase. However, the weight of this word is not at all understood by the people who use it. It's insensitive to those who are seriously suffering with this illness and will make these people less likely to build up the confidence to speak out about it. So getting people to learn about it early on would hopefully prevent this. So basically, psychology will teach crucial skills built towards our future and also benefit youth with their own mental health awareness, as well as educate them on the social aspects of life.
Next slide, please. Prevention. Next slide, please. Prevention is so important. You don't have to struggle through something, depression or anxiety, and have to find your way out. Sometimes you can't completely prevent something, but you can minimize mental health problems. Good hygiene, like sleeping, exercising regularly, taking a bath once in a while, is one of the ways to minimize it. Being social and finding ways to control negative thoughts are also great ways. Those have all been proven to help prevent mental health problems. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
What a great breadth of self-care strategies. I think it was a very important point that prevention may not always be the solution. Sometimes you should just take the time to apply these self-care strategies to minimize the effects. And it's definitely important to talk about how to take care of yourself, especially during this pandemic and during post-pandemic recovery. I now invite the next group, Gautam, Emily, and Smriti, to talk about the importance of terminology.
Next slide. Hi there, my name's Gautam. Today, terminology is used, mental health terminology is used everywhere. And of course, that includes offices, schools, education centers, and also everywhere in public. These slides will help you understand what terminology is used for and what words you should use instead of other words that people think is funny, but it's actually not, and they are real mental health disorders. Smriti is going to talk about how to use these words and how they can affect other people. Next slide.
Thank you, Gautam. So how we use words. Sometimes it can be concerning that the terminology we use to express and describe our mental health state with words we actually don't feel. So many people use adjective-like words to express how their mental health is like, For example, I'm depressed because I have a test. Well, they might actually be like annoyed or they're not prepared for the test, but many people use that word because they think it's cool or it's normal to use because so many people use it in the society. And if people had any idea what it's like that way with a mental illness, they wouldn't use it so lightly. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So also stereotypical wise, people judge and use words according to how someone's dressed. So if someone's dressed in shades of black colors or gray colors, most people might have judgment on them thinking they're depressed or have anxiety. Whereas if someone is wearing bright and like shiny or bright like colored clothes, they might think that they're not depressed or they don't have anxiety, but in some situations it can be the opposite. So we have to be considerate and wise while judging. And similarly, not everyone with a mental health issue has been suicidal or depressed. There are many different mental health issues as well. So having a mental health diagnosis isn't necessarily a negative thing. People with mental health issues are still able to live fulfillingly. So we need to use our words carefully and not affect someone with them. But as I said earlier, many people don't do it like intentionally and they're just trying to express their feelings, but not knowing how to use the right word. And this can be a problem even with someone who has a mental illness, like they want to express their feelings, but they might not know the correct terminology or the correct words to use. So yeah, next slide, please.
So the effects on that can have on people using these wrong words is not all can lead to self-harm, but it can certainly lead to real mental health disorders if that keeps on happening, and that repetition pattern could lead to self-harm and bottling up feelings that affect everyday tasks. People sometimes might enjoy something, maybe painting, and after a couple of incidents they might not start enjoying it. So patterns and repetition, what makes people have certain different effects on themselves, and not being able to express it out loud would certainly do people up, and that's when they think whether I should seek support. Some people are scared to seek support because of family issues, or maybe they're just scared to talk to someone, thinking that they might say to someone else. So that's why never bottle up anything. You should say it out loud is the best treatment. Next slide. So if you are looking on how to not hurt somebody, as Smithy said, it's not intentional. You might and currently living in the society we are today, all we see on social media, technology, those words, people don't know the right meaning. So you might see something on your phone and immediately want to use that word. So maybe try not to say the words that you don't know the meaning of, just because your friends might think you're cool. Also, another way is apologize if you think that you might have hurt somebody, or you can see their reactions quite sad. Also, if you can try to learn the definition of that word, and even learning and saying. So if you see someone has a mental health disorder, you can go and talk to them, and it might make them feel better. And not only will it make them feel better, but you might feel better too, that you've actually helped someone. So these are the ways to right wrong. Yeah, next slide.
Okay, so what Gotham and Smithry were saying was basically these people who say like these things to each other, like, oh, I'm so depressed, leads up to stigma, but do we really know what stigma is? So stigma is basically the misunderstanding of a concept due to like significant stereotypes. And there is a significant amount of stereotypes surrounding mental illness and neurological conditions like learning disabilities. And many people use mental illnesses as adjectives in everyday life without realizing the impact it has on surrounding people. Like, oh, I'm so depressed because I have a test. So many people will also use mental health conditions in a joking context,
which does contribute towards stigma and misunderstanding. And throughout life, I've heard people use these serious conditions so casually to describe how mad or sad they are about something. And next slide. Here are some of the most common phrases I hear people say almost every day, which is really sad. So I've been told this in the last month. Some people have come up to me and said, oh, I've just got homework. I'm going to go kill myself. That pencil isn't straight. My OCD is going nuts. Wow, you're so skinny. You look anorexic. She's moody, must be bipolar or something. And I've dropped my pencil. That was so embarrassing. I'm going to get PTSD. Next slide. And people don't understand the effect these phrases can have on surrounding people in the community. And hearing something so ignorant could severely trigger somebody without knowing. So instead of using these hurtful phrases, here are some replaceable ones. So instead of saying, I just got homework, I'm going to go kill myself, you could say, I just got homework and it really sucks. And instead of saying she's so moody, she must be bipolar or something, you could probably just say, hey, she's not in the best mood, so I'll go check on her. And replacing these simple phrases can reduce stigma and help people get a better understanding of these mental illnesses for future situations. Next slide.
Well done, team. And absolutely, the language we use around mental health is so important. So great advice on how to right wrong. I now invite the next group, Rissa and Sanuki, to talk about culture and mental health.
So could you go to the next slide, please?
So we would like to first start off with a quick acknowledgement to the MHFA, their values of compassion, excellence, inclusion, innovation and integrity reflect on how much of a strong and capable organisation they are, which is why it is an honour to be future leaders.
Does culture affect our mental health? The answer to this question is yes, culture does affect our mental health. In context, culture is associated with socialism and our identities. While the culture we were born into was not asked to decide, culture gives anyone a sense of belonging and familiarity in the diverse world. Culture controls a small part of our social ethics, principles, or morals, as culture makes up people's beliefs, values, traditions, and sometimes makes up the languages they speak. These building blocks reflect on our social behaviors and levels of comfort with some social groups. For example, we might be more comfortable with people we already know or a cultural or social group we are already familiar with. Next slide, please. How does culture affect personality? As we learn things that we associate with our everyday lives, our brain stores this information to influence us and our behavioral patterns. Our culture also influences these behavioral patterns. In some cultures, common things to us may be considered impolite. For example, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, it's all right to be late to most events. People of the region, with their relaxed and unhurried attitude, don't believe in being punctual. In fact, being on time for a party would be like going there uninvited, I've heard. Next slide, please.
Ethic and emic perspectives. Many professions that study culture and analyze matters with ethic and emic perspectives. When taking an emic approach, local, native, and insider perspectives are observed. Contrastingly, an ethic perspective is when a foreign and global perspective is observed. Ethic helps us to analyze and learn what the foreign world understands versus the emic perspectives that helps us understand local realities. We can identify the effect this has on culture and mental health because people of a culture could be hurt by the perspectives of some ethic perspectives, and this could lead to more serious mental health issues. Regardless of the abundance of perspectives and ideas, the important thing is that in a real diverse environment, There is not only culture, but our unique personality. This is just as Malcolm Forbes said, diversity, the art of thinking independently together. Next slide.
Cultural stereotypes. Cultural generalizations to you may be an alternate way of saying cultural stereotypes, but they're two very different terms with different definitions. Cultural generalization is a respectful hypothesis that assumes that people of the same culture have similar, usually physical characteristics. But cultural stereotypes are when members of a culture are categorized completely based on their culture and are believed to have all the same or mostly the same characteristics. Unfortunately, stereotypes are widespread, and often culture is known based on these stereotypes. The pressure from these stereotypes can make us feel disgust in our culture and not appreciate it. It could try and make us not include cultural aspects into necessary parts of our lives and mold ourselves into someone new. Next slide, please.
Eating cultural stereotypes. Having a role model. When Obama became the President of the United States of America, American peoples were feeling his positivity and stereotyping defined reasons, and it was reportedly said that the perceptions of racism were reduced. This is because a person is motivated and inspired from the person's hungry, ambitious behaviors that uncovered true potentials for them. Focusing on the positive effect on being in a cultural group. Asian women underperformed on maths tests when reminded of their gender identity, but not when reminded of their cultural identity. This is because being proud of your cultural background brings a sense that you have self-respect for yourself and connectedness with others.
Learn to love yourself and accept every culture and its customs. The urge to teach social and cultural acceptance is booming, with 1 in 3 Australian school kids being victims of discrimination. Next slide, please. Cultural stigma. The Commonwealth Fund Minority Health found that 43% of African Americans, 28% of Latinos, compared to the 5% of Caucasian Americans, experienced racial discrimination in a clinical setting. In the Pacific region, between 25.4 to 85.2% of people experience cultural stigma from matters like collectivism, Confucianism, religion, and supernatural beliefs. The same National Stigma Report card read that 63% of participants were releasing themselves from cultural and spiritual practices to reduce their mental illness. Next slide, please.
There is light at the end of the tunnel. From the words of Booker T. Washington, a lie doesn't become truth, wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by a majority. The way we dominate culture in our lives differs from one another, but when it comes to mental health, we should remember that there are always people that we can reach out to. Next slide, please.
Cultural support services. There are many mental health support services that provide support for immigrants, refugees, and multicultural people. There are a few reasons why you may need special services, including cultural stigma. Every culture has a different way of looking at mental health. For many, there is growing stigma around mental health, and mental health challenges can be considered a weakness and something to hide. This can make it harder for those struggling to talk openly and ask for help. Understanding symptoms. Culture can influence how people describe and feel about their symptoms. Can affect whether someone chooses to recognize and talk about only physical symptoms, only emotional symptoms, or both. 2. Community support. Cultural factors can determine how much support someone gets from their family and community when it comes to mental health. Because of existing stigma, minorities are sometimes left to find mental health treatment and support alone. 3. Resources. When looking for mental health treatment, you want to talk to someone who understands your specific experiences and concerns. It can sometimes be difficult or time-consuming to find resources and treatment that take into account specific cultures, factors, and needs. A website you may look to is Settlement Services International. Next slide.
Here are some ways to foster positive thinking. This can be done by recalling positive life events. Spend time thinking about some of the best memories of your life, whether it's a family vacation you went on a couple of years ago or something that happened in work or school. Recalling the happiest times in your life can bring more positivity to your mindset. Perform acts of kindness. Doing nice things for other people reminds you that you have the power to make a difference in the world. Giving to others also helps you think more positively and feel happier. Helping a neighbor in need, volunteering for a community activity, or raising money for a charity are just a few simple ways to improve your psychological well-being. You could also practice mindfulness, because although mindfulness is a skill that takes practice and dedication, over time you can get better at learning how to be present and in the moment. Also, you could try expressing gratitude. Next slide, please.
I think it's very important to acknowledge the effects of culture on our mental health. And it's essential that we understand the differences between cultural stereotypes and cultural generalizations, as well as emic and etic perspectives. Thank you so much for providing our audience with such valuable information. I now invite our next group, Brianna and Ellie, who will talk about rural mental health.
Next slide. So as you can see, there are a few facts. In New South Wales alone, 40 teens are rushed to hospital for self-harm every day. COVID lockdowns have made numbers rise since 2019. By the new financial year in 2019, there are 14 adolescents, under 18, who committed suicide, and in the first half of this year, that has risen to 17. Rural mental health as a whole is a very unique issue. A lot of families have very strong beliefs of what their kids should be in their eyes, and a lot of these kids are also having a part-time job, which is then providing part of the income for their family because their parents or caregivers may not have a well-paying job. And if you're in a remote or isolated area, your healthcare is already limited as your physical healthcare. But when it comes to your mental health care, it can be little to none. And often when you are accessing these services, it can go to one of two ways. You can either get told, yes, we can help you, or no, you've got to go to the larger hospital, which can sometimes be hours away. And with schools being in COVID with online learning, a lot of the stuff has gone online, so you're not seeing your teacher face to face, you're not having that contact. And for a lot of these kids, it's their escape route. I know it has been for me a few times, and with a lot of schools being government-run schools, and I know not every government is having that as a forefront, and even though it should be, it really truly isn't, because as a regional girl myself, I don't see a lot of the Premier or the Deputy Premier or really any of my state or federal members really all that much, which I feel like they need to be going into schools and fostering that positive insight, insightful, we can do this, we are helping you, instead of just letting it being brushed under the carpet. And again, if you look at the slide that is behind me, you'll know that there is a survey that we conducted as a group, and schools need to have more support groups, which therefore requires personnel to be equipped. And even though you don't see school budgets as a student, I am pretty sure that the support of the students is quite far down on the list when it comes to technology, safety, all of the regulations that they have to live up to. And of course, early intervention needs to be there as well. So starting in primary school, I know a lot of people that I've spoken to have said that they haven't learnt about mental health until year 7 or year 8 when they've experienced it themselves. And even though there are some support groups like Seasons for Growth, I know has run in both my high school and my primary school, that's only a select few students who have expressed, or their parents have expressed interest in their kid doing that. And with overall mental health, even despite lockdown and all of the commotion that comes with that, mental health as a whole has come back in the middle. And I will now pass it over to my fellow group member, Ellie, and she will talk about the Victorian.
Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So as Brianna has already touched on, mental health care in rural Victoria, and I'm guessing rural Australia, is really hard to access. And one of the reasons for that is that rural mental health is regionalised. So depending on your postcode, you can only access a certain amount of services. So I know in Victoria, if you live in a rural area, you're assigned, a CAM service and a primary hospital and a tertiary hospital, which sounds like a lot, but I'm pretty sure, like a lot of people here would know, it's very hard to access the care that is necessary. So, for example, one really big issue in rural Victoria is the division between physical healthcare and mental health care. So there's a lot of conditions, and I feel like we've touched on earlier today, the importance of physical health and mental health as a whole is vital, really. And so the fact that the division between the two is so clear, it makes it really hard for a lot of people with conditions that require mental health care and physical health care. So I know, one of the most fatal mental disorders is anorexia, and people with anorexia really do struggle to access the care that they need, because if they're too unwell physically, they're denied mental health care, and if they're too unwell mentally, they're denied physical health care. And that's just such a massive issue, not only in regional Victoria, but it is accentuated there because people just can't even access one or the other because they have to travel into the city or look at private healthcare, etc. So one of the biggest killers in regional Victoria is the fact that mental health care is regionalised. So to fix that, it's a long road, but I think what we need to do is really look at mental health more holistically instead of it being such a separate aspect of health. I think, we don't have a hospital for your leg and a hospital for your arm. We have a hospital for your physical health. So I think that mental health needs to be incorporated into healthcare, just like every other health service that's provided. So yes, thank you for listening. Next slide, please.
Thank you, team, for discussing rural mental health. I think this topic is something that is so crucial and extremely sensitive as well, which may make it really hard to discuss, but you did a wonderful job. And the fact that this topic is often left out of conversations or swept under the carpet, as you said, makes it so much more important that people like you speak out and highlight the prevalence of this issue. So once again, thank you, and thank you for sharing your personal insights as well. I now invite our next group, Gideon and Alana, who will be talking about individual differences.
Hello, everyone. So in this presentation, we'll be exploring the aspects about what is individual differences, the importance of individual differences in mental health, individual differences of stigma in mental health, individual differences of funding and insurance in mental health, individual difference of false diagnosis in mental health, and finally, how can we help individually diverse people? Next slide, please. Our presentation objectives will be to understand the importance of individual differences in mental health and to understand how we can support people with mental illnesses. Next slide, please. Okay, so first, we'll be exploring individual differences. Well, what is it? So the American Psychological Association defines individual differences as traits or other characteristics by which individuals may be distinguished from one another. This is the focus of differential psychology, for which the term individual differences psychology increasingly is used. However, in the context of mental illness individual differences, they can range from anything from ethnic groups to socioeconomic status and culture. Next slide, please. There are many reasons about why mental illness differs in each individual, and here are some important examples. First, ethnic groups affect how mental illnesses differ in each individual. In particular, ethnicity influences the identification of depression and anxiety. For example, many GPs have discovered that there has been a massive underdetection of symptoms of depression and anxiety among Asian patients. Next, mental illnesses differ in each individual depending on the gender. For example, gender differences were found for psychological distress, anxiety, and depression, with girls reporting significantly higher scores than boys. In addition, culture plays a part in determining how a person reacts to mental illness differently. For example, culture can influence how people describe and feel their symptoms. It can also affect whether someone chooses to recognize only physical symptoms or only emotional ones. Age also influences how mental illnesses differ in each individual. The Centers for Disease Control estimates that only between 1 to 5% of older adults living in the community struggle with major depression. Those estimates rise to 13.5% to people who require more constant care and 11.5% for older hospital patients. And finally, social and economic status factors into how mental illness differs in each individual. Children living in low economic status, or SES households, and disadvantaged neighborhoods suffer more anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and delinquent behavior, and poor adaptive functioning. Next slide, please. So the big question, why exactly do individual differences, why are they important in mental health treatment? Well, individual differences in mental health treatment is important because of three main reasons. Stigma can play a huge role for the lack of treatment seeking. Stigma can be viewed as a mark of shame, disgrace, or disapproval. This results in some individuals or ethnic groups to not even take up treatment. For example, this is a main reason why Asian communities are very slow to seek professional help. The social and economic status aspect of individual differences affects the way mental health can be received. A users pay system where consumers either pay directly out of their own pockets for services or to cover the cost of health insurance will further disadvantage people with lower economic status. Individual differences can lead to the tendency to treat cultural disorders as disguised forms of Western disorders, which is also called ethnocentrism. These disguised forms of Western disorders can lead to false diagnosis to a separate condition, and as false diagnosis can lead to an inappropriate treatment. Next slide, please.
Now we will dive deeper into the three categories of stigma. Next slide, please. Stigma is largely influenced by ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and social economic factors. Next slide, please. What is stigma? According to Goffman in 1963, which is the most established definition of stigma, It is an attribute that is deeply discrediting that reduces some of the whole discounted person who is detained and discounted one. In terms of mental health, there are two forms of stigma, social and self-stigma. Social stigma / public stigma refers to negative stereotypes of those with a mental health problem. Self-stigma refers to the act of individual internalization of these negative stereotypes. Next slide, please. A stigma is a three-part process. 1, lack of knowledge, ignorance. 2, negative attributes. 3, people behaving in ways that disadvantage the stigmatized person, discrimination. For example, stigma is displayed when someone with a mental illness is called dangerous, crazy, or incompetent, or a threat to society, rather than unwell. Stigma can lead people with mental illness to be discriminated against and miss out on work or housing, bullied, or to become a victim of violence. It can also mean that they don't seek treatment when they need it. In addition, like we said before, stigma can also be split up into two categories: social stigma and self-stigma. Social stigma is the negative stereotypes of people with a mental illness, whereas self-stigma occurs when a person embodies those negative stereotypes. This can cause low self-esteem, shame, and hopelessness. A 2011 survey found that almost 9 out of 10 mental health services users in England had experienced some form of stigma. Next slide, please. Stigma mainly exists because many people don't understand or aren't educated about mental illness, and also because some people have negative attributes or beliefs towards it. Instead of learning about mental health, they create their own stereotypes about the people. For example, many people believe that mental health patients are dangerous when in fact they are actually at higher risk or high risk of getting attacked or harming themselves and rather than hurting other people. Next slide, please. Insurance, a contract in which a customer pays the company a monthly fee to protect themselves from risk of financial loss in terms of mental health. There are private or hospital insurance for psychiatric services or rehabilitation. A fund is a pool of money set aside for a specific purpose in terms of mental health. This funding refers to the amount of money spent on covering mental health services for treatment insurance. Next slide, please.
In 2016, 11.8 million Americans had a need for mental health services that were not met. Of these people, nearly 38% could not afford the cost of treatment. Mental health costs continue to rise higher and higher each year, with many of the middle and lower class individuals not being able to afford any treatment. This trend continues with people without any medical insurance. One US study reported that those with insurance were 6 times more likely to have access to care than those without. Next slide, please. Sarah Bryan, 30, was a normal young lady living in Melbourne until her mental health spiraled out of control. During this period of time, she withdrew 20,000 Australian dollars to pay for her mental health care costs and living expenses. Quote, prior to that, I was using my credit card to survive. I had about $4,000 of credit card debt. Ms. Bryan said, worrying about money is not something you want to deal with when dealing with your own mental health. Ms. Bryan, now 30, estimates that her PTSD and her binge eating disorder may have cost her $85,500, including $58,500 in lost income. Ms. Bryan was not eligible for disability payments, but she says that she was too unwell to job seek. She was eligible for the New Start allowance, however, felt too unwell to actively hunt for jobs and go to job-seeking appointments. So those payments were stopped too. Advocates say that those who need mental health care the most are often unable to pay for it. Next slide, please. False diagnosis, an incorrect conclusion about the cause of a disease or problem. In terms of mental health, false diagnosis is the incorrect conclusion of the mental health illness. Next slide, please. How does individual differences affect false diagnosis? A study displayed that more than a third of patients with severe psychiatric disorders were falsely diagnosed. Further research into the topic highlights that cultural and ethnic factors play a substantial role in false diagnoses. Asian Americans, for example, are more likely to receive false diagnoses of schizophrenia and less likely to receive accurate diagnoses of depression or other mood disorders. This is because mental health professionals may hold the stereotype that they're actually mentally healthier, which is a bias that contributes to the inadequate treatment and prevention. In the cultural aspect, 72% of the religious commitment variables were beneficial to mental health. These religious activities were found to improve diagnoses of their mental illnesses. A 12-year follow-up of all articles appearing in the American Journal of Psychiatry and Archives of General Psychiatry. In an Australian survey, a majority of patients with psychiatric illnesses wanted their therapist to be aware that the spiritual beliefs and needs helped cope better with their mental illness. Next slide, please. How can we support people with mental illnesses? First, we can check up on these people to see whether they are okay regularly. If they feel down, we can show our support and care by actively listening to their struggles and worries in their life. Second, we can make sure that they feel safe, respected, and accepted so they can easily share who and what is affecting their mental conditions. Third, we can encourage them to exercise and get involved in more social activities, such as watching movies or playing sports that can help increase their positive emotions, such as happiness and gratitude. And fourth, we can suggest to seek some help from medical professionals if their mental conditions persist or continue to get worse. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you for listening.
It's so important to understand all these factors that affect individual differences in mental health. And I think you both did really well in explaining the importance of these factors in terms of individual mental health, as well as stigma. And this definitely ties into the fact that everyone needs to be treated differently. For example, applying different self-care strategies that we were informed about earlier this evening. I now invite our final group, Parsa and Amanda, who will be talking about support plugs.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing great this evening. Our topic is support plugs for teenagers. This presentation is by Amanda and I. Next slide, please.
Anxiety is the most common mental health issue among the youth, i.e. people aged between 16 to 25 in Australia. 1 in 4 Australians aged between 16 to 25 years old will experience a mental health problem in any given year. Suicide continues to be the leading cause of death for young Australians. As shown in both diagrams, the statistics highlight an increasing trend in suicide rates in teenagers who have experienced a major depressive disorder in recent years. Next slide, please.
As published in the infographic released by the Mental Health Commission of New South Wales, the top 3 concerns for young people were the school or study problems, coping with stress, and body image. Next slide, please.
Anxiety. By definition, anxiety is a mental health disorder characterized by feelings of worry and/or fear that are strong enough to interfere with one's daily activities. In severe cases, anxiety disorder can lead to panic attacks, which is a sudden episode of intense fear. Symptoms of an anxiety disorder include recurrent fear and worries, trouble concentrating, extreme self-consciousness, and/or withdrawal from social activity. Today, common causes of anxiety in teenagers are high expectations, whether it is academically or socially, peer pressure, and/or body development. Depression is a mood disorder that is characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities, causing significant impairment in daily life. It may be described as feelings of sadness, loss, or anger. It is considered as a serious mental health issue which affects both mental and physical health and can lead to self-harm and suicidal thoughts. Next slide, please.
In today's presentation, we'll be first covering the interventions of mental health disorders, including anxiety and depression, followed by different types of treatments for each and support resources. Next slide, please.
The act of seeking help for the management of a mental health issue in teenagers remains the lowest in any other age group. Only 31% of young women and 13% of young men with mental health issues sought professional help. The three main treatment methods are psychological treatments, pharmacological treatments, and self-care. Next slide, please.
Most effective psychological treatments for mental health disorders include cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT. Cognitive behavioral therapy is the identification of unhealthy thoughts and behaviors and the replacement of thoughts and behaviors with more helpful and healthy ones. Exposure therapy. Exposure therapy involves the learning of a new relaxation technique, such as breathing retraining. The patient is then gradually exposed to fear-inducing stimuli, and with the use of techniques such as deep and slow breathing, the patient learns to associate the stimuli with a more calming response. Psychotherapy is an extended form of treatment in which the therapist and the patient build up a trustworthy relationship that allows the therapist to understand and link the patient's past and the present in order to reduce anxiety levels by discovering the foundation and basis of which the anxiety is built upon. Support plugs. Support groups. Support groups allow individuals to open up about their unresolved issues, meet and make new friends, and learn how to overcome challenging situations and cope with them effectively. And lastly, e-mental programs can be used along with other types of treatments. E-mental health treatments, similar to CBT, are based on face-to-face therapy, positive psychology, and behavioral activation. These therapies mainly focus on reframing thoughts and changing behavior. However, this occurs with the use of an app such as My Compass. Next slide, please.
Pharmacological treatments are the use of medical drugs to help reduce the symptoms of anxiety or depression. Antidepressants are recommended as the first line when pharmacotherapy is required to treat anxiety disorders. The two most common pharmacological treatments are the use of benzodiazepine and beta blockers. Benzodiazepines, commonly known as benzos, are a class of psychoactive drugs with lowest brain activity, hence helping calm and bring relief to the patient. Beta blockers work by blocking the effects of norepinephrine, which is a stress hormone involved in the flight or fight response. It helps control the physical symptoms of anxiety, such as increased heart rate. Next slide, please.
Some self-help and alternative therapies include mindfulness, relaxation techniques, correct breathing techniques, building self-esteem, learning to be assertive, and structured problem solving, exercise, and dietary adjustments. Next slide.
Next slide, please. This is just an overview of the treatment methods for depression. It is vastly similar to treatment methods for anxiety disorders in teenagers. Next slide, please.
Oh, no. Oh, could you go back to the slide previous one? Thank you. Headspace. Headspace is a National Youth Mental Health Foundation providing early intervention mental health services to 12 to 25 years old. Headspace can help young people with mental health, physical health, including sexual health, alcohol, and other drug-related services, and also includes work and study support. In addition to support networks, it also offers self-care methods through blogs posted on their website. Online counseling with a therapist anytime between 9 a.m. and 1 a.m. is available at eHeadspace Support. The support groups specialize in a range of issues from Indigenous health to academic challenges. There are also more than 100 Headspace centers in Australia. Kids Helpline. Kids Helpline is a free phone counseling service for young people aged between 5 to 25 years old. It also offers support groups where young people can talk to each other in a private setting. It operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the phone number is 1-800-55-1800. Next slide.
Young people have access to many support networks. This could include a trusted adult, whether that is a parent, teacher, or a school counselor. Teens generally choose to confide in close friends. Professional help could include seeking the help of psychologists or psychiatrists, or simply a GP. Organizations such as the Mental Foundation Australia offer support groups where teenagers can engage and confide within each other. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of a few websites and organizations that teenagers can seek help from. Next slide, please.
So how can adolescents navigate the mental health system? So firstly, we must look after ourselves. Secondly, share our knowledge with others, such as friends and peers. Thirdly, listen and help others who require help and support. And lastly, we could take part in organizations such as the Mental Health Foundation Australia to further increase awareness of our mental health's importance and provide assistance to those in need. Next slide.
Thank you.
Well done, team. And what a wonderful way to finish tonight's event by talking about support plugs. I would just like to congratulate all of our future leaders for their months of hard work and dedication in putting this webinar together. I think the presentations really hit the mark in that they were so relevant and they came firsthand from our youth. Our future leaders did such an incredible job at accurately articulating such complex topics. So a massive, massive well done. Again, thank you to all of you, our attendees, for joining us tonight to have these important discussions. Hopefully next year you'll be joining us in person. Thank you from Arishi and I and all of MHFA, and we hope you have a great night ahead. Thank you.